Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Chit Chat Across the Pond. This is episode number 819, and I'm recording it on July 25th. I have no idea when I'm actually going to play this because I already recorded an episode today, but I'm your host, Alison Sheridan. And I want to remind the audience of about a couple of weeks ago when I was getting ready for MacStock to do a presentation and I was going to include some stuff about screenshots. I was trying to figure out how to take a screenshot of the screenshot app. And I described in the podcast about how all these great people came out of the woodwork to help me figure out a way to do it. And the first person, and actually the winner with the highest quality of a screenshot, was a lovely gentleman named Teg Bushman. Teg and I have been chatting, and I thought he sounded like an interesting guy, and I should invite him onto the podcast. So welcome to the show, Teg.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have been able to help somebody who is so knowledgeable in things. I was like, wow, I was able to help somebody who I didn't think would ever need my help.
Well, that's actually perfect for the talk I was doing. Was called Chain of Happiness, and it was about how no matter how much you know, somebody knows more than you do, and no matter how little you know, somebody knows less than you. And it's because we all know about different things, and it's all about helping each other. And that you could not walk into my talk better than that. That was great. So the reason I wanted to get you on the show was because you mentioned that you're a professor at Western Technical College, and I have no idea what it's like to teach technology, to teach IT stuff in today's day and age, because I'm guessing it's slightly different than when I went to college in 1976. I don't know. I'm spitballing here. So, but I'm going to start us back a little bit more at the beginning. How did you early on get interested in technology?
So I'm, not young necessarily anymore. I think I've hit that pinnacle. My birthday was just yesterday as we record this, but, mid 40s, we'll say. And I've been interested in computers and doing stuff with computers since I was 13. Our family friend brought home a computer. He worked in IT in the 90s when, everything was kind of exploding, right? Like, Windows 95 was just about to come out. The internet was just around the corner for a lot of things. And so it just really interests me. Now, the thing I hated the most about it was I hated typing because I still to this day am a fast hunt pecker. I never did the home row or anything. But yeah, so I just really had a passion for it. I love learning things. I'm very curious. And what better place to be those things than an IT professional, because stuff is always changing and there's always stuff to learn and you'll never know it all.
I think that's a perfect description because there are a lot of people who don't like it when things change computing wise. And, some of them can still enjoy computers, but there's a lot of people who don't enjoy it because it's changing. Why did they have to move those menus? Why did they have to do this? And so if you enjoy the challenge that, okay, what I knew yesterday is no longer good enough. Now I need to know this. Yay. That's a fun thing.
Yeah, and sometimes it actually ends up being better. And people forget that sometimes, if you don't have something that changes, you're going to be stuck doing something that maybe is terrible. Now, something I will say from being an instructor and also from just being somebody who's a tech enthusiast, and I'm sure you've had this happen in your life too, and I'm sure listeners have had this happen, that we don't do ourselves or the industry a lot of favors because we don't explain things very well to non-technical people. And I think that's where people get frustrated with technology is people don't like to feel stupid. And if you move and change things, and it becomes challenging. And so I think that the industry could do a lot better at trying to bring non-enthusiasts into the fold and not have that attitude of, well, don't you know just to click on this and click on that, idiot? Because I've run into those people, and that's not the attitude to have.
I will body slam people when I hear them do that to somebody else. One of my favorite things when I was working, I ran an IT organization, and my administrative assistant was really smart and had zero knowledge in IT. So I would go and try to explain things to her, and she knew what I was doing. I was like, if I could get her to grasp it, if I could give analogies that would make her be able to understand, it was perfect. So I started with somebody smart but not educated in it, and she was perfect to soundboard with. I really enjoyed doing that. So you said that you first got a computer. You didn't say what kind. It wasn't a Mac in 92?
It was not a
or your
Mac. It
neighbor?
was a, oh goodness. It was some, I don't even remember what it was. It was a green screen, and it
Mm,
was I assume some type of DOS thing going on because it was
okay.
all green text and crazy. We ended up eventually getting some type of Windows machine. We did Windows 3.1 or something back in the day. My our family friend that got me interested in it, he taught at Empire College, which was kind of like a technical college in Santa Rosa, California, and he was doing the computer support program there. And so I would go on the weekends with him when he was imaging, not imaging, I guess it wasn't imaging back then, but would be installing Windows on multiple computers with floppy disks going from computer to computer. And it was crazy, but I learned a lot from just sitting in the classroom while he was teaching and tutoring students and stuff. And but never got the paper for it, right? Because like you know, they tell you sometimes you need the paper to know that you know what you're doing. And I never got that till years and years and years later, but realized that I needed that. So, but it was a lot of fun. I didn't get into Macs. I know this is a slight Apple bias thing going on, but
Ever so slight.
until 2005, uh, and I had a coworker who was getting rid of his old G3 tower thing, and I was like, yeah, I'll take that. It was like $50 or something, and I used to love, this is so stupid, but I would go into CompUSA and I'd go over when they had the eMac, that one that's on like the cool arm,
Yeah,
and
the
I'd play with that,
education.
and then I would maximize and minimize apps because I thought that was just the most magical animation, and it made me want to Mac so bad.
I
Ugh.
used to go to CompUSA and answer people's questions. Just Saturdays, I'd just go hang out there. And invariably, they'd be telling them the wrong information. And when the person that worked there moved away, I'd go, okay, here's what you really want to know.
That still happens at Best Buy. You'll go in and you'll hear them saying something, and you're like, that's wrong. That's
Maybe
wrong."
not. So you got into Max around what year?
That was like 2005, 2006 is when I first
Okay.
got. And
So,
then, of course, Intel happened. And of course, I jumped on that. And that's when I got my first new Mac. And that was a great experience.
yeah, that's fun. It's amazing that they've made so many shifts chip wise and successfully rode those surf those waves in at the right point. So now, you what career did you have at this point?
Oh, gosh. Well, I've done a lot of different things. I'll try to compress it because it's probably not what everybody wants to hear about. But I got out of high school. I worked for a movie theater for a few years. I was an assistant manager there, which I still miss film. Like it was cool
Mm.
threading a projector and all that kind of stuff. Great industry to kind of work in. It was, even though it was kind of a low paying job, it was very kind of prestigious in the community because you got to see movies for free. And how cool is that? Then I worked retail for a few years. Then I was working at an internet service provider. If you are in California, you've probably heard of Sonic. They used to be Sonic.net, but they
Yeah.
finally got the rights to be Sonic, which we would get tickets about people's messed up hamburgers and stuff from the Sonic drive-through sometimes, which I thought was always confusing when we'd email back and be like, we're an internet provider. But I worked for them for a few years, and that's where I got into Macs and got into Linux because all of the servers there ran on Linux. So most of my work was done through a web browser and through a Linux terminal to look through log files and help, do pinging to people's modems and stuff like that was all terminal applications. And then I moved to Wisconsin, which is a long story, but I moved from California to Wisconsin. They allowed me to continue to remote work for a while. And then I went back to retail. And then I got a job working at the city here where I live, doing IT work as like a help desk technician, but didn't have an education yet. Had kind of a poor experience working there and decided, I need to go back to school and I need to fill in the gaps that I have and get that piece of paper that companies are looking for to get that dream job that I want that will be a good experience. And I actually went to the school I teach at now, Western Technical College,
Oh
and I got
wow.
an associate's degree in network administration. And one of the instructors in a very first term class here taught networking. And he had just started working here a couple years before I was attending. And he said that he was a student here and how great it was to be a teacher and how awesome it was to, share your knowledge with people and kind of ignite that spark of creativity and excitement in nerddom, if you will. And after I graduated, I ran my own company for a little bit doing IT consulting. And out of the blue one day, I got a call from this instructor who actually, to be honest with you, I didn't even remember giving him my phone number. And putting him in my phone because it came through with his name. And I was like, why is he calling me? And he said, there's a job opening. And I applied. And 3.5 years later, here I am.
Wow. So let me ask you, in the industry now, you needed that degree in order to teach there, but how important do you think a degree is in IT these days? Because there's debates on every side about this one.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because before I went back to school, my opinion was that it was silly to need to get a piece of paper because if you can prove that you know how to do something, why should a piece of paper be necessary? If you can show, if you're a programmer, for instance, and you could show like a GitHub repository of like a project you've done or demonstrate, your home lab or anything, right? If you have a YouTube channel that talks about tech, that's a big thing now. If you could demonstrate proficiency by showing what you know, why do you need to spend all this money? Because it is expensive to get an education and get this piece of paper. Now, this is coming from someone who's currently teaching and make my living giving people these pieces of paper. So don't get me wrong. But I realized, but I realized what education does that doing it yourself doesn't is it gives you a clear picture of the whole picture of everything. And so when I went to school, I knew networking, but there were gaps in my knowledge of networking, stuff I had never worked with before. I had never worked with virtualization. I had never worked with subnetting or VLANs before. And these are things that I learned and really opened up a whole new frontier of knowledge for me. And being able to do bigger, cooler projects as time went on because I never even knew that it was something that existed in technology because I was self-taught. And unless I had come across it myself or worked on a project that needed it, wasn't ever something that I knew about. And so education does a great job, school in general does a great job of scaffolding your knowledge and making sure that you have a full picture of a topic. And it's structured in such a way that things build on each other and you can kind of go in a bunch of different directions. And so I really, now that I've gone through and got a degree, it's really important, I think, for people to go to school just to have that structure and have that flow and that, connecting all these things together, where if you're working on little projects, it's hard to kind of bring it together just by yourself sometimes.
Yeah, so maybe you could have learned about virtualization next, but it was a piece that wasn't there that maybe you didn't realize you needed.
Right.
One of the things I always think about is I had about 125 sysadmins working for me at one time. And anecdotally, amongst that group, there were certainly college-educated people who couldn't work their way out of a paper bag, and there were self-taught who were phenomenal. But on average, what I found with the people who had gotten a degree was that they had a structure to how they diagnosed problems, how they anticipated things that could go wrong, a scientific principles of change one thing at a time, document what you did in order to tell, did that change fix or not fix, and how many things did you change at once? And that to me was one of the biggest things from an engineering or computer science program that I thought brought to the IT field.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we teach our students right in the beginning is, don't, and I'm guilty of this too, don't come at a problem in 10 different ways and then try and see if it worked, because now you won't know which, like you said, which of those 10 things fixed it or broke it worse or whatever. One of the things I tell all my students is we teach, so an associate's degree is over 2 years if you're a full-time student, and then you get this associate's degree, and then you can go on, we have transfer agreements, you could go to a bigger university and get a bachelor's degree and get a master's degree or, a PhD later on if that's what you want to do. And I try to let my students know that IT, even though the programs I teach in are kind of specialized in a way, I teach in two programs. I teach in cybersecurity and network administration. That's one. And then I teach in web and software development is the other program I teach in. And I try to tell them that in 2 years, there's no way that you can know everything about any of these fields. It's just impossible. And so I tell them that what I hope at the end of 2 years and they go out and get a job or they move on to get a bachelor's or something like that, that they can at least look at a set of Google results or look at a Chat GPT output and kind of know how to smell it, have that sniff test, if you will, of does this seem like this is leading me towards the answer I'm looking for, as opposed to when you don't know anything, right? You don't know, and you might go 100 miles in the wrong direction and make things 100 times worse. And there's a kind of a secret in IT that non-technical people seem to not be aware of, I guess, is IT people are just better at Googling things, if you will, than a lot of people. Because you can't know everything. And if, Allison, if you were to, contact me and say, XYZ is broken, I'd say, well, did you get an error message? What program were you using? And I literally am typing all that stuff in, like, here's the error number. This is what you were doing at the time. And then with the knowledge that you have that you've gained over time and experience, you kind of know, nah, it's probably not that. It's probably not that. Oh, this kind of might be it. And that's what I try to tell my students is I don't expect you to leave here knowing how to do all of this. I expect you to leave here knowing how to find the answers and how to know which answers seem more correct than something else.
Yes, absolutely. And that probably is more and more important as we get into AI helping us do our jobs and it's spitting out something that might be completely illogical. But my favorite example of what you're talking about is making sure you understand your units when you're multiplying numbers and, knowing the difference between if it looks wrong, maybe you did it in metric instead of imperial units or vice versa. And that might cause your spacecraft to miss a planet. But being able to look at it logically and say, does this meet the smell test? Back on what we were talking about, documenting things, writing things down on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Carol Kane plays the chief engineer right now on the show, and Montgomery Scott is a youngster, and he solves something, and she says, well, you wrote it down, right? And he's like, no, I didn't write it down. And she just loses her mind. Like, how are you ever going to do it right? If you didn't write it down, you have to write it down.
That's very important in IT. And I will tell you, I'm trying myself to get, one of the things that's happening right now at our university is in our building that we teach IT in, we had a donor give a lot of money to renovate the building that we teach in and to get it ready for the future. So get it ready for, things like AI, robotics, all of that kind of stuff. And one of the things we're doing as part of that is setting up a networking room for our students to be able to put servers in and do all this kind of cool stuff. And I'm realizing the first time we set some of this stuff up, we never documented it. And so I'm trying to be very mindful to document everything I do, write down everything I've installed, every password I've set on things, every service that's running and why and how they interact. Because, if 5 years from now, if something happens or they need to upgrade something and I'm not, and plus, even a couple of weeks from now, I may not remember why I did in that order or why these things interact with each other. So it is very important. For sure.
Yeah, Bart talks about doing it for future you as well, right? Is to go, why did I do that? I can't believe that. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, so go over again what it is you teach, what subjects?
So two programs that I teach in are network administration and cybersecurity. In that program specifically, I teach Cisco 1, which is like an introduction to networks, which sounds like it'd be really baseline, but we cover a lot in that class. I also, in that program, teach Linux server administration, so Linux, basically. I also teach database server administration, so teaching students how databases work and how to communicate with the database and how to make sure that things are logged properly and backed up properly. Backup is a very important thing, as is documentation. So that's kind of what I teach in that program. And then in web and software, we just redid our whole program. And in there, I teach DevOps, so how development and operations kind of work together. So not only are people nowadays programming applications, but they're also doing more and more of the server side administration stuff when they're developing their applications. So that's a big one. In the past, I've taught web programming, so HTML, JavaScript, CSS. I've also taught Microsoft Office, all the boring stuff, that people consider really entry level. But yeah, so that's basically the classes I'm really excited to teach are those.
That's a lot. That's not all in one, rolled up into one class. That's a whole bunch of different classes, right?
Those are all different classes. Yep.
Okay, good. Because I was going to say, starting with Linux admin, that's kind of a head start. And in another class, you're teaching Microsoft Office. Those are pretty different levels of skills.
Yes.
What are the requirements for them, the students coming in? What do they need to know already? Can they come in with nothing?
What's really cool about our campus is our current president has really pushed for what we call an open campus. And what that means is if you want to go to school here, you can. And we don't have any entrance test. We don't have, when I was a student here, I had to take the Compass test and, they'd score you on reading and writing and math and all this, and to make sure that your gen eds, you were entering the right things. We've gotten rid of that because we want education accessible to anybody who wants it. And so we don't want to not have disadvantaged groups and stuff like that not be able to find time to take the Compass exam or the cost that's associated with that or whatever. We basically make it totally open. So when you enroll in our program, any of our programs at the college, you basically you come to an orientation day, you meet some instructors, you meet with an advisor, and they kind of assign you the classes that you're going to have. They talk to you if you're going to be a full-time student or a part-time student, and they talk about what that kind of looks like for you. They talk about our demographics of our college are really interesting because we have a lot of people who work full-time jobs, who are also full-time, parents, sometimes single parents, and they're trying to be full-time students. And that's a really interesting thing to have to deal with all of that. Yeah.
Well, you could probably help those people though, because that's what you did, right? You went back to school later in life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I didn't go back to school till I was in my mid 30s. But yeah, so we have all these people with all this background. And then when they come into our program, we start slow. We start with that Cisco class, which is an introduction to networking to kind of get them started. We have some intro to cybersecurity classes, which kind of just lays the foundation for things with terminology, because in IT terminology, there's all these words and acronyms. We love acronyms, and that's a really steep hill if you're trying to get into the industry to kind of overcome. And so we've structured it to kind of covering the basics of the terminology for technology kind of right in the beginning. We also have some stuff where they learn, Microsoft Office and how to use email and how to use our learning management system, stuff like that. So they can be successful with the tools that we use throughout the courses in the 2 years that you're going to be here, or maybe more if you're a part-time student. Sometimes we stretch people out to 3 or 4 years.
It sounds like some people come in at a much lower level than other people, so they would get a different set of courses to make them successful. You're saying that's why it might take somebody a little bit longer?
You can definitely skip some of those classes. You can get credit for prior learning or basically test out of the classes. But we always, like me coming back to school, I looked at Cisco 1 for me. Well, I already know networking. Why would I need to take this class? But I took it anyway because it filled in a ton of gaps that I didn't know that I had. And so we try to get students to take everything, because even though on the surface you may look at a class and look at what's required for that class, you may think, I already know all this. You'll learn something.
Sure.
And also I tell students all the time, you know what? If you already know it, it'll be an easy class for you to get an A in.
Help your GPA. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about cybersecurity. What do you focus on in a beginning cybersecurity course? I mean, you said terminology, but are you talking about who the threat actors are? Are you talking about advanced persistent threats? Are you, where do you start? That's a big topic to do a beginning course on.
Yeah, it is a big topic. And so, like I said, we start with a lot of terminology, what a white hat hacker is, what a black hat hacker is, what, different terminology just in technology of, Ethernet versus Wi-Fi and the different Wi-Fis, like just a lot of the terminology, of course. But then we also cover stuff, it's kind of like, I don't know, Allison, you've been retired, so I don't know if you've ever, I'm sure you have, but I don't know if you've ever taken one of these. We have annual training of, fishing, like how to not get fished, and how to spot, people that are trying to socially engineer you and stuff like that. So those intro classes, there's two of them. There's Intro to Cybersecurity and Cybersecurity Essentials. And those two courses cover, what is social engineering? What are some of the tactics that people use to try to get your passwords? What is a good password? What is a passphrase? What are ways that you can encrypt data? How can you spot phishing? What is phishing? And catfishing and all these different things that
Harder and
have
harder and
come up
harder
in
with
our
AI helping.
yeah. And so trying to instruct this to our students of what all these different vectors could be, and then telling them, you don't know how all of this is possible yet. These are the different things that are possible. As you go through your other courses, your networking courses, your Windows courses, your Linux course, your database course, you'll see how each of these topics ends up impacting each of these specific topics when you go into those classes. And then we cover those a little bit more.
Yeah, interesting. My daughter works for a company where the IT organization regularly phishes the employees. They send out suspicious emails to see who gets caught. And then you have to just go. I don't think they publicly humiliate you or anything, but you get sort of like, got you. And so they're constantly on the. I mean, she will probably. Hopefully, she will never get caught. I have fallen for some before, but hopefully, she'll never be caught because she's being tested all the time. That she's got this watchful eye because she doesn't want to lose that game. And I think it's genius to phish your own employees. Done with love.
It is. For a little bit of time between graduating and becoming an instructor, I worked at a credit union part-time, and they were very serious about this. Like once every month and a half, they would try to phish everybody because you're working with financial stuff, and that's really important. So, and sometimes they would send stuff from legit email addresses that you would think is not phishing, but we knew there were certain types of data that we were not to respond to or click through for email. And so it would literally come from the person that legitimately might ask you for this stuff. But that is not the path in which that data is ever communicated. So it would catch people doing stuff like that. So really fascinating in that aspect. When you're dealing with people's money, it's really important not to have any of these mistakes.
Money, healthcare, planes staying in the sky. There's quite a few fields where that matters. Now,
yes.
Talk to me more about database server administration, what you teach in there.
Yeah, so a lot of it is how to set up a database server. So when I went through the program, it was on Windows Server, and we did Microsoft SQL Server. We only have the one Linux administration class, and I actually really love Linux. One of the reasons I love Macs, because you can get into a terminal and do a bunch of Linux stuff. And so when I took that course over, I said, you know what, we're going to do this on Linux, and we're going to run MySQL Server on Linux. And students learn how to install a server. They learn how to create users and set permissions and make sure that, only certain people have access to what they need access to. And then they learn a ton of the closest thing we get to in that program, which is programming. We teach them how to write SQL queries to pull data from different tables and databases, and how to connect that data together, how to sort it, how to eliminate certain things, how to insert data, get data out, why you would use a database versus an Excel spreadsheet or Microsoft Access or all the other things people do when they don't know how to set up a database. And so we just kind of go through all of that. And then we learn how to secure it, how to back it up, how to replicate it. So if one system goes down, that it stays online. I use Amazon as an example a lot in that class because I say, there are millions of people who use Amazon any given minute. And that database needs to be dynamic. It's spread out over multiple systems. And how do we load balance between all of those things? When you make a purchase over here and your user account is saving your order in this database over here, but the next time you log in, maybe you're accessing a different system. How do those things stay in sync and don't get duplicated or get lost, or transactions, what happens if halfway through a transaction something goes wrong? How do you recover from that? How do you backpedal? How do you make it go through? So there's a lot to it, but it's really rewarding for the students to learn all of that. And one of the things that they learn in there that's
back up. How do you know the answer to those questions?
That's a great question.
How do you know how that works at Amazon? Because that's just this big mysterious ball of magic to me.
Right. Well, databases work the same everywhere. And I've taken classes on how Amazon AWS works. And what a lot of people may or may not realize is the reason that Amazon Web Services exists is that Amazon needed those same tools and features for their retail establishment online. And so at some point, Amazon said, hey, why don't we sell this infrastructure and these tools to other companies who might need to use it and help defray our infrastructure costs? And so if you know how their systems work and what they sell, and how those systems are recommended and how they teach to use them, you kind of also know how Amazon works. And so you kind of can reverse engineer it, I guess, in a way.
It sounds like you're a continuous learner.
Always. I love learning. It's like my favorite thing.
So you keep taking courses?
You have to. Especially if you're going to teach students things, right? Like you can't be behind the ball on things. We have to be, what people don't, maybe they do, maybe they don't. In education, it takes us a long time. So if a new technology comes out, AI is a great example. It's what we're dealing with right now. AI came out in, ChatGPT hit the landscape at the end of 2022, I think it was, or 21, somewhere around there. And it exploded. And we just now are starting to implement AI stuff because as an educator, we have to not only learn it ourselves before we can teach it, we also have to find out our employers that are going to hire our students, what do they need from it, and cater the education to that. And then how are we going to put it in our existing classes? Are we going to work it into our existing stuff? Like, am I going to add AI to my Linux admin course? I could. Or does it need to have its own course? And if that's the case, then what do we replace? What course do we take out of the program? Because because of the fact, because of the fact that we're an open campus and we're trying to keep costs down for students. Our mandate from our college is that we have a 61 credit limit for our associates. So if we can't fit into that 61 credits, we have to drop something else and put it in because
get rid of Microsoft Office.
Well, our program has, but the rest of the campus we also teach business programs. So if you want to become a business person, we have that. There's a ton of other programs. We teach HVAC and welding and automotive. We teach everything. Cool. And so they have to learn those things for their courses. But we've kind of tried to filter it out of our IT courses because we have too much IT stuff we want to teach.
Well, and in addition to teaching AI, there's also just helping them figure out how to navigate AI within each one of these disciplines.
Yes. And even in education, even in my job, it's really challenging. One of the big questions we have right now is how do we teach students and how do we change how we assess them in the world of AI? Because previously, you have like a multiple choice test you give them. Well, they could use AI on that. You might have them write a paper. Well, they can use AI on that. So the question becomes, how do we change our assessments to be AI proof or harder for an AI to do? So in my classes, what I've done with that is we do a lot of lab-based stuff. So we do a lot of hands-on in the class. So I give them a lab and say, here's all the steps that you should do to try to make this work. And as you go through the course, you get less and less instructions because you're doing kind of stuff over and over, and you should know by then all the different steps you need. And then at the end, I have them write a reflection. What did you learn? What was the purpose for this task? What did you struggle with? What did you find easy? And I try to. The students we have, it's kind of easy to tell if AI wrote it, and so I just straight up call students out on it. And I'm like, I've seen your writing before, and this is not your
Not
writing.
it.
And I tell students, I say, you know what? It's your money. It's your time. If you want to use AI and cheat yourself, that's your business. But you're spending your time and your money here to learn something. When you get hired, they're going to expect you to know this stuff. You're going to be in an interview, and you're not going to have AI to answer questions. So it's in your best interest to learn this stuff while you're here. And that usually works.
I would hang my head
for
in
students.
shame to hear you to speak like that. I mean, that's from the heart and it's honest. And I'm just thinking, I'd feel like garbage if I did that to you. If I did that to me, I guess is the right phrase, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm
you're not trying to make us feel bad,
about it.
them feel bad, but I mean,
yeah,
disappointed in yourself if you have done that because you have wasted your time and your money. And why are you here if you're going to do that? I would bet. Well, I've been hearing professors talking about doing things like giving the students an assignment to ask an AI this question. And now the assignment is to analyze what they said that the AI did and where was it wrong and where was it right, and did it give you the useful resources to follow? The sources to follow back to figure out the answer. And I think that that's a real interesting way to do it, is so that it helps teach them to use AI to do what they need, but to be able to analyze it and know when it's helping them and when it's not, because it's still so odd how it makes stuff up sometimes. It's like, it's right. Made that one up. Right. Hallucinated, said something completely false. Right. And you have to be able to tell when it's doing that.
Yeah, one of the instructors I teach with, he's been teaching for a long time. He's very knowledgeable. He's worked for the military doing cyber defense training for the military and stuff. Brilliant individual, amazing to listen to his stories. And he talks about AI. He said, it's a psychopath. He's like, it just says whatever. And even sometimes when he's like, that's incorrect, it's like, oh, yes. And then it still does it wrong.
I've been fascinated by it saying things, you tell it it's wrong and it goes, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you telling me that. Yes, I was wrong. I'm going to start telling it it's wrong when it was right and see if it does the same thing. Right.
It's tough, but I will say, there are some tools in AI that are really useful. But I feel my personal opinion on AI is it is going to end up being like everything else. It's a tool. And tools have their strengths and their weaknesses. You're not going to use a hammer, to screw in a screw. Like you might get it in there, but that's not the best way to do it. And so what I've been telling, we've had some faculty that the sky is falling with AI. And I've said, I've been around in IT long enough to realize there is a usefulness to it and there is something to it that people are excited about. I'm excited about it, but it's not going to be everything that everybody says it is. All these AI companies are saying that, it's going to do everything. There's not going to be a need for anybody to work anymore. All these things are going to do everything for us. The programmers are not going to exist anymore. And I just don't buy that. I think it's going to be a tool that programmers use. When we've talked to, one of the things that Tech College does is we're required to meet twice a year with industry in our area. And those are called advisory committee meetings. And we have experts in all of our program fields come to these meetings, and we ask them, where's the industry going? What are you using it for? What should we be teaching it? What should we be teaching students that you're going to eventually hire? And the consensus in the programming field in our area here is it is freeing up their programmers to do more advanced things. So before, where they would have to type out boilerplate HTML or JavaScript or come up with fake copy, lorem ipsum, but better, they don't do that anymore. That's what AI is for. What their programmers now take that hours that they get back is they're doing more advanced things, more cleaning up code, working on integrations with things, adding features that they never had time to add because they were busy doing all this low-level stuff. So I think in the end, that's kind of where it's going to go. And I also think it's going to democratize people to make simple one-off applications. You might have an idea as somebody who doesn't know how to program that you want to, do something that does this one specific task that's fairly simple, but there's no app for that. You might go into an AI system and say, I want an app that does this specific thing. I want a button here. I want a button there. I want it to pull this from there and put it over there. And it probably can make that for you. And that's not something you're going to sell or that someone's going to buy, but it's a tool that you specifically need that works for you. And I think that that's where it gets really exciting.
I was reading an article by somebody who was saying much of what you were just saying, and what they suggested was that the thing we should focus on as humans is doing more beautiful design. Having people, and I am not in the category of people who can do that. I can make buttons in a table, I might get them centered correctly if on a good day, maybe not always. In fact, there's some problems I've got right now on that. But if we had people who understood good design and good UI, that's a completely different skill than writing a for loop.
Yep.
That's already solved. We already know how to do that. Write a for loop, boom, it's in there. But having a layout that is intuitive for the task at hand, that's a skill that is maybe more the artsy-fartsy side of the brain. I'd hate to admit it, but I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's somewhere that AI is very weak, right? I think everybody has a good idea of how AI was trained. It sucked in stuff that humans made, and that could be art as well. But I feel like AI is not good at coming up with something original. That is still a very unique human thing. And a computer can look at every art that's ever been created in all of humanity, and it can mimic that. But I don't think it's ever going to be able to create something from scratch. And that's interesting to think about. I mean, maybe we'll get there. I mean, who knows 100 years from now? But you also got to remember with AI, how many years, Allison, have you heard that we're going to have flying cars?
Yeah, where are those flying cars?
And we still don't have flying cars. And so when people say like, oh, AI is going to, we had an exchange student this last year, and he said, I'm never going to have to work. AI is going to do everything. I'm just going to be able to sit at home and do what I want all day. And I said, that's probably not going to happen.
Who's going to feed you?
Yeah, because you're not going to have, I guess you could have an AI robot that would like farm or whatever, but I still feel like there's a lot of human stuff in there that AI just can't do. And so it's been tough in education because we've been trying to deal with this. We have a lot of people who don't understand it, who are panicking. We've had to try to figure out, do we teach prompt engineering? Because it's important what you say to the AI depends on what you get out. A great example of this was in Linux administration this last year when I taught it. I walked over to a student who was trying to get through the lab, and he said, none of these commands are working. And I said, well, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I'm asking Copilot, and it's giving me these commands. And when I put them in, it's telling me command not found. I don't know why it's not working. And I said, well, that's because Copilot is giving you commands for Ubuntu, and we're using Red Hat. And Red Hat uses a different package manager. Now, if you would have told Copilot that you needed this to have happen on a Red Hat machine, it would have given you the right outputs and commands you could have used. But since you didn't tell it that, you said, I just need it to do this, and didn't tell it what system you were on, what version you were on, any of that. It just did the best it could, and it was wrong. So teaching students that you have to give the proper context to get the right answer has been interesting to see students kind of struggle with.
I've been using both ChatGPT and Claude, and I forget which one of them did it. I asked it a question about some tool I was using, and it said, well, actually, since you use Text Expander, you could do it in there. And I was like, what? Excuse me? How do you know that I use Text Expander? And it said, oh, you told me, silly. It's like, oh, yeah, I did tell you that. But it was like 3 weeks before or whatever, and it was sitting in this little pile of information I'd been feeding it. And so now I could freak out, or I could say, I use all of these tools. Like, let me copy and paste the list of every application on my Mac. And whenever I ask you a stupid question, tell me which one of my apps that I already own can do this thing, or how can I combine them to solve the problem. But keeping it in that context, now that I've told it a bunch of times, I'm running macOS Sequoia 15.5, it now pretty much answers me within that category because it already knows that. I don't have to keep telling it. But Yeah,
So how
that's
come you didn't use one of those AIs to figure out how to take a screenshot of a screenshot tool?
I think I did, and one of the problems was the generic terminology that Apple goes out of their way to use. What is the Photos app called? Photos. You know, what do you read books in? Books. You know, it's almost impossible. In fact, when I was doing my talk about this, trying to say the words of, so I took a screenshot of the screenshot.app in order to make a screenshot that I wanted. You know, I just said the word screenshot 48 times in the same sentence, and it's hard for me to follow what I meant, much less anybody listening to me. And I think that was the problem, was identifying that I was talking about the application. And most people don't know what screenshot.app is, or that it exists as an application, that it's inside your utilities folder, inside your applications folder. So if most people don't know that, then the knowledge set of these LLMs that have sucked in all human knowledge has very, very few entries for screenshot.app. So it didn't get me there, but the hive mind did.
Yeah. And I've just used this as an example to say it can't solve all the problems. People are still the best at these things.
This is the worst it's ever going to be, though.
That's true.
Yeah. I'm still intrigued in, and if I was to be teaching at your university and talking about AI, one of the things I would do is ask the students, like, what's the most inventive use of AI that you've heard of? And I've talked about this on the show before, that there's these people that just think so far out of the box that I'm stuck in. You know, I'm asking it to spell check when they're asking it to solve these amazing problems. One guy, Brian Brushwood, was setting up a new studio in his house, and he asked ChatGPT to walk him through all of the questions he should have answered before he decided on his solution, and only give him a question at a time. So it told him to ask it, or told it to ask him questions, which I never would have thought of. Mike Schmitz at MacStock last week or 2 weeks ago says he uses Grok to argue with him. So when he wants to challenge his own thinking, he argues with Grok. And so it helps him make his own arguments better, or perhaps even changes his mind about things. And that was like, wow, that's crazy. Or the guy that took all of his appliance manuals, loaded them all into Notebook LM, and now he can ask Notebook LM, how do I change the water filter on my refrigerator? And he doesn't have to tell it which refrigerator. It's going to give him the exact right answer, because it's only trained on this one set of things that he needs. And one of the things I want to do is I want to do that with podfeet.com, because I've got 20 years of blog posts, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of words that are in there that I wrote. And the answer to my question is probably there because I wrote it, but I didn't remember. And it'd be great to have that as like my own little agent. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I listened to Connected on Relay, and Federico Viticci with Mac Stories, he loaded every blog post he ever had into it. And so then he can be like, I think I mentioned this feature of iOS sometime. Tell me all the times I talked about this. And so exactly what you're saying, to just be kind of like a mind of your mind, because our minds only hold so much, but our digital minds can hold everything infinitely.
Now, I have asked ChatGPT how to do that, and it gave me the instructions, but they sounded hard, and I'd have to learn a bunch of stuff, so I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. I wanted a button where I could say, can you just suck this in? Here's the URL. Here it is. Or here's the RSS feed. Take that. And it said, nah, dog, you got to do a bunch more stuff, so it's not there for me yet.
It'll get there, though. But the counter argument that I'll say to you, because you said this will be the worst it'll ever be, my counter argument is, these tools have now scoured all the human created stuff on the internet, basically, is my understanding. Going forward, there is so much stuff that AI has generated that is now out on the internet. So it's kind of ends up eating itself. So I would argue that it might also, in a way, be the best it's ever going to be to a certain degree.
It's like because Michael Keaton in that movie about clones.
Yeah. Like as you continue, if you have bad AI that is, if you have AI that has written something incorrectly, and then it ingests that to kind of reinforce that it's right, even though it's wrong, it's going to get more wrong. So I just think that people are like, well, it's gotten so much better. I'm like, well, yeah, because it was still working with human stuff. And now there's so much on the internet that's AI that people have put out there, that it's going to be ingesting that, and that could be interesting. Because when you get in your bubble, even as humans, if we get in our bubble, we stop looking at other stuff, and then we go down these weird rabbit holes, and we get stuck in these little things. So I would just say, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but these are the things I think about.
Could be. Yeah, I love that. That's fascinating. I did talked on the show about a report that looked at the effect on Stack Overflow for since ChatGPT came out. And for anybody who doesn't know about it, Stack Overflow is a place where nerds post questions and answers to programming things. And the Stack Overflow has had a very steady decline in the number of comments over the years, not associated with ChatGPT, but when ChatGPT hits, you see this dramatic drop in the usage of ChatGPT. I'm sorry, of Stack Overflow. But what they found was it was only in languages that were old. So pretty much every question that's going to be asked about JavaScript has already been asked and answered on Stack Overflow 2,800 times. So there's no need for us to keep doing it in Stack Overflow, because asked and answered, all those for loops, they're already written. People have answered that question in every form possible. But new languages were not dropping off at that rate. And so, like you said, because there's new information, but pretty soon, but the AIs are chewing that up right now. But we have to keep generating new information to feed the machine.
Yeah. That's exactly what it's going to take. So I don't know. Well, it's an interesting time. We'll have to see. I kind of look at it as a better search engine. Like when the search engines came out, right? It's like, well, I can find anything so easily. So, I don't need the encyclopedia or the dictionary anymore, because I can just look it up on the internet. I just feel like a lot of AI use by average people, not nerds, but average people, I think it's a better search engine, because it can give me my exact specific answer right now. So if I were to search for, if I ask a question, how many podcast episodes has Alison Sheridan put out? If I Google that, I might go to your website. I might see that you have episode like 400 and something or whatever. And so I can assume that, okay, well, maybe 400, but what other things have you been on? Where I could just ask AI, and AI might just say, oh, Alison Sheridan has been on this amount. It just cuts to the chase.
Yeah, if you ask ChatGPT what is the longest currently running Apple podcast, it will tell you that it's MacBreak Weekly. And you tell it, no, MacBreak Weekly started after the NosillaCast, or it started in such and such a date. There's one older than that, and it'll come back and go, oh, I'm sorry. Mac OS Ken is older than that, and I say, no, it is not. And then it comes back and goes, oh yeah, the NosillaCast is the longest running, currently running Apple podcast. So it's still wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was a bad example, perhaps. But I'm just being like, it seems like it's easier to get to your, like, if you have a very specific kind of question, it seems like it's easier than like doing a Google search where, you might have to search through a few pages to get your answer, as opposed to an AI. But you're right, you still have to fact check it. Like, you shouldn't just accept. I mean, we've been saying that about the internet for years, right?
Well, that's where I actually miss search engines now is. Lately, I've been trying to find answers to a specific question, and I have to have it from the original source. So we're looking at splitting up our family group in our Apple families and trying to figure out, for example, can you still be in a shared photo library with somebody who's not in your Apple family? Does that work? I don't want anybody else's answer from that but Apple. I don't want to know from Mac Rumors. I don't want to know from anybody, Joe Blow. I don't want it from a forum, and it's almost impossible to find now. And I have to cover my eyes and cover up Gemini when Google's answering me, and then look to see, no, it's still sending me to the wrong place. So it's actually really hard to find the original source a lot of times. And I need a better search engine now that'll stop giving me the AI answers. I want the original, because I'll say, no, I want it on apple.com. It goes, okay, here it is on a forum.apple.com,
That's tough. Yeah. But I also, to that specific example, I think companies like Apple need to do a better job posting things about their own software, because they sometimes put stuff out and they don't tell you anything about it. You have to find out through third parties who have, well, I did that once and it seemed like it worked, but there's no official Apple documentation that says that works.
Sure. This one was documented, and I eventually found it, but it took me quite a few tries before I could get to no, stop giving me this other stuff. Well, before we close out, and we are going to have to close out, I want you to talk about your personal interests in side projects, because you do some really, really cool stuff.
Yes. So I love technology and I'm such a nerd, but I also have a love for non-technology things sometimes. So I do, since 2017, so not as long as the Nasilicast by a long shot, I've done a podcast about Disneyland. And I just, as a kid, it was my happy place. Anytime I kind of felt down, sad, whatever, I went there and I felt better. And so I used to live a lot closer. I live in the Midwest now. It's a little harder to get out there, but I love it. And I found a friend here in Wisconsin that loves it. And we started doing a podcast about it. And we've met tons of wonderful people through it. And it's just a wonderful thing. It's called DL Weekly. So if you're a Disneyland fan, I want to eventually try to get Max Sparky. I know he's a huge Disneyland fan. I want to have him on sometime because I know he loves Disneyland as much.
If you need a connection, he's a buddy of mine. 100%.
Yeah, so there you go. Because I know he'd love to talk about Disneyland because he loves Disneyland. Yeah.
He takes his laptop to Disneyland and just hangs out on park benches at Disneyland to work.
So I do a second podcast called The Hub Crawl, and my co-host on that we have a funny story about that he, when he was in school, he would take his laptop to Disneyland and sit on Main Street in the morning, and he'd have his little coffee and he'd type his school papers. And I thought that was just the coolest thing to be able to do that. I've never lived close enough to be able to do that. But yeah, so we do a couple of cool podcast things. So the Hub Crawl is, if you've ever listened to Clockwise, which if you follow Alison, Clockwise. It's basically it's Clockwise. It's that same format, but with Disney questions instead of tech questions. And so we go around, we invite two guests on, and we go around the table and ask and answer Disney questions every week. And we do, well, not every week, every other week we decided to do that. But, and that's been kind of fun.
And where would we find DL Weekly and the Hub Crawl?
So the DL Weekly is at dlweekly.net, and the Hub Crawl is at thehubcrawl.com. And of course, if you just search for either of those in your podcast client, you can find them.
And that was thehubcrawl.com?
Correct.
That sounds really, really fun. You have a terrific radio voice. You have a terrific microphone. I'm getting to see his video. His video is terrific. One of my things I look for in a podcast is it's got to have good audio, and you've certainly got that going on too, along with lots of fun and excitement. I am so glad that you answered my post on Mastodon, just a dumb little question about how to take a screenshot of a screenshot. That was awesome.
Yeah, I'm really glad too, because like I said, I've followed you for quite a while. I love listening to this stuff because I always tell people who maybe have not heard of you before, I say, oh, she does a ton of stuff on accessibility, because that's such an interesting topic that I feel like there's not a lot of people talking about accessibility, and you cover it very well. And also, you have a very good way of explaining things to non-technical people. You're very good at, for people who may not know, and it's kind of like this. And I've really appreciated that, because as an instructor, I'm always looking for better ways to explain a complicated topic to someone.
Now I'm going to start up our conversation again. What do you guys talk about in terms of accessibility at the school?
So when we teach web programming, we talk about that you need to have, all your images need to have alt tags, that, how screen readers work and why all of that stuff is necessary, because you don't want someone coming to your site that's visually impaired and not be able to navigate it. So we talk about making sure that images are described accurately. In fact, at our school, you'll appreciate this, we are mandated by the college that everything has to be accessible. So if I put a screenshot in a lab, I have to describe it, and that's a great use of AI. I paste a screenshot into AI, and I say, create an alt tag for this, and it'll say, this is a table that has 4 rows. The top row has this and this and this and this, and then the next row has this and this and this. So it really describes it well. I found that took something that was very tedious and challenging to do and made it very easy, and I've shared that tool.
As long as you check it.
Yeah. And I've shared that tool with a lot of faculty, because that's just something that just takes time. It's not impossible. It just takes time.
Can I suggest you use markdown tables? Then they're text.
There you go. But I'm usually doing it in Microsoft Word. So that's the problem, is we have Word.
Yeah, just stop doing that.
Well,
I just got to give you a hard time for that.
No,
but,
I know.
So before we go, then I need to give a big shout out to James, who apparently is a big fan of Clockwise. And so I'll say, hi, James.
He's going to love that.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Teg. I have a feeling we're going to get back together and talk about more stuff soon.
Love to.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Chit Chat Across the Pond. Did you notice there weren't any ads in the show? That's because this show is not ad-supported. It's supported by you. If you learned something, or maybe you were just entertained, consider contributing to the Podfeet podcast. You can do that by going over to podfeet.com and look for the big red button that says Support the Show. When you click that button, you're going to find different ways to contribute. You can donate one time through the big Donate button with a credit card or Apple Pay, or you can use PayPal. If you want to make a recurring contribution, click the Patreon button. Keep in mind, I don't charge Patreon for Chit Chat Across the Pond or Program by Stealth episodes, just once a month for the NosillaCast. That keeps it simple. If you want to contact me for any reason, you can email me at allison@podfeet.com, and you can follow me on Mastodon at podfeet.com/Mastodon. Maybe you want to talk to other Nosilla castaways? You can do that in our Slack group at podfeet.com/Slack. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed.